Hello everyone, my name is Garen. Welcome to the Black Zombie YouTube channel where we talk about everything disc golf and more. In this part of the video, I want to specifically talk about the Hyzer shot, how the Hyzer shot works, what it is, what you might use it for, how different discs work with a Hyzer shot, whether it's a stable or understable, how headwind, tailwind, how wind generally affects the Hyzer shot, and what you might use a Hyzer shot for. I'm sure I'll miss some parts of it, but let's really break down the Hyzer shot. Let's talk about what the Hyzer is first. You might have seen the other video where I talked about a Hyzer versus flat versus anhyzer. We're going to dive in a little bit more so you know more about what a Hyzer shot is specifically. So here's your disc. It's very important to know the top of the disc seems obvious, but the flight plate right here, that's the top of the disc, and the bottom of the disc where your fingers go under and grip it, and the top part where your thumb stabilizes. It's important to know the top of the disc and the bottom of the disc because that helps you identify if it's a Hyzer, anhyzer, or whatnot shot. So when you're doing a Hyzer shot, I'm a right hand backhand, so I want the flight plate to face away from me. That's Hyzer. So I'm going to grip it at the bottom, stabilize with the thumb on top. It's going to come through. We could talk about the shot as far as coming through, but we're going to kind of stay away from that. I'll have another video talking about actually how to throw a shot, follow through, and how to get your distance. We're just going to simply talk about the Hyzer shot, what it is, how it works. So the Hyzer shot, again, is going to be me coming backhand, right hand, backhand, and it's going to be like this. So when you have your release point, the Hyzer is going to be like this. Again, this is flat. That was anhyzer. We're going to talk about the Hyzer shot. So if you throw a Hyzer shot and you don't want the disc to come up or over and you just want to stay, you want a more stable disc. We had another video we talked about stability. You may want to watch that if you don't understand stability or understable. But if you have a disc, if you pick a disc that's stable and you throw it on a Hyzer, it's generally going to stay on that Hyzer line, whether you throw it high or low. But a lot of people that throw a Hyzer shot that want to stay on a Hyzer line, they'll get a very overstable disc, throw it like this, and it'll stay like this the whole flight until it hits the ground, and then it oftentimes skips. If you throw on that Hyzer line and you throw a understable disc, say you throw like a Roadrunner or something that's very understable, and you do the same thing, you throw it on your Hyzer line, maybe even a monster Hyzer line, that disc being understable wants to flip up to flat and maybe even over. So that Hyzer shot allows you to get more distance because you're throwing the first leg of the disc, or the distance is on the Hyzer line, and being understable, that understable disc flips up to flat in that second part, and then as it gets up flat, it's either going to go straight depending on how stable it is. If it's very understable, it's going to actually turn to the right. Sometimes you want to go all the way right because you're making that shot, but if you want that longer leg, it's going to come over, fly further on the anhyzer position, and then when it slows down, it's going to come back left. A lot of times people get the very long distances by doing the Hyzer flip shot, which is that shot right there. So they're throwing a normal right hand backhand shot, Hyzer line, understable disc that's going to fly flip to flat. So it's going to be on a Hyzer line. After like say 80 to 100 feet, it's going to come up flat. And then depending on how stable it is, it's going to like bend over this way, fly for a while, and come back. That's where you get that full-blown S to make your shot and to get that distance. You can also depend on the wind what you're going to do. If you throw a disc, like say you have a big headwind and you still want to throw on a Hyzer line, so you want to get something very, very overstable, because even a stable disc might flip up, because when we talked about in the other video, with a headwind, it destabilizes that disc. So if you throw even a somewhat stable disc on a Hyzer line into a wind, it's still going to flip up. It might get a little squirrely. So you want to pull a disc out that's going to be more overstable to handle that headwind. So remember that when you have a big headwind, you want something more stable so it'll do more what you want it to do without flipping and getting squirrely over the right. If you have a headwind and it's a slight headwind, 15, 20 miles an hour, you can head off that unstable wind coming in by doing even a baby Hyzer sometimes, depending on how stable it is, but a more Hyzer shot into a headwind. That spin is really fast coming out, so it cuts through the wind, it comes up, and it's going straight through the headwind, but it's already penetrated, and it's going to actually fly a little bit more into the headwind, but it's already kind of got its distance through the headwind, and as it slows down, it'll come down. So you can sometimes finagle it through the wind with a Hyzer shot, even on a less stable disc, depending on the headwind. Now, if you have 40-mile-an-hour winds, that's when you see people either throw way overstable and maybe even a flat shot or a Hyzer shot, but that's the faster the wind is coming at you, the more stable shot stable disc you want to throw. If you have a tailwind, it's going to destabilize the disc, kind of like in the video we talked about. So destabilizing a Hyzer shot, stabilizing a Hyzer shot is going to make it even less likely to come up. So it's going to like push it down. So if you have a 20-mile-an-hour tailwind and you decide to throw a Hyzer shot, just keep in mind it's going to shorten that distance. And maybe you want a shorter distance just to kind of pop around a tree or go 150, 200 feet or whatever the distance is. But keep in mind that tailwind is going to make it less likely to fly forward, and it's going to have it cut in faster left. So it's not going to like go near as far as that tailwind. So if you want the distance and you have a tailwind, you want to destabilize the disc. You want to throw a disc that's less stable, so it's not going to hold the Hyzer line very long because it's going to want to flip up to flat. And remember, sometimes if it's really unstable, it turns right, which is destabilizing the disc. But with that tailwind stabilizing it, you can disc down and throw something less stable and throw it hard on the Hyzer line and let it flip up to flat and let it even turn over a little bit. But the whole time that wind is making it more stable, so it's going to turn it in. So the way you get more distance with a tailwind when you're throwing a Hyzer shot is to throw a less stable disc and just rip it and let it kind of flip up to flat and let the wind push it, and then it'll stabilize the end and come back down. Now, if you have a right to left and you're throwing a Hyzer shot, you have to be very careful. That's actually can be a very dangerous shot because you have the wind coming right to left, and your Hyzer shot is already prone to getting hit underneath the belly of the disc, which is not good because you really have to, it gets to be very touchy because the wind's pushing on the bottom of the plate. Either one, you have to have a understable enough disc to fight that and still come up and over, and then it's just going to be all squirrely because the wind's still pushing on it, so it's going to push it down. If you have it too stable, it's already stabilizing the disc this way, and if it's already stable, it's going to fight a little bit, but it's going to come back down. So throwing any disc on a Hyzer with a raging or even somewhat of a right to left, you have to be very careful with that because then you have to worry about how far up it flips and where it's going to go. So oftentimes a lot of people who have a right to left wind, they don't put it on a Hyzer. They put it on a flat shot. I mean, you might still need that Hyzer, the big, like coming a big Hyzer to go around a bunch of trees. I mean, there's still a shot for a Hyzer with a right to left, but a normal right to left shot, normal shot that has right to left wind, you have to be very careful because it really stabilizes that disc so much that it makes it really hard to get it to flip up or do what you want it to. If it's a left to right, it always also gets a little bit tricky because if you throw it on a Hyzer, that wind is pushing on the top of the plate, so it's keeping it from coming up. And if it's a stable disc already or overstable, it already doesn't want to come up anyway, so it's actually double stabilizing that first part of the flight. So unless you really get that up where the wind's coming underneath it, for a stable disc, it's going to like push it right down in the dirt. So if you throw a stable Hyzer shot with a left to right, it may not even pop up, so it's going to really cut it short. So if you have a left to right, honestly, again, Hyzer shot's not the best for left to right either. Oftentimes when I throw a flat shot, but if you do with the left to right throw a Hyzer shot, you have to keep in mind the wind's going to be pushing the flight plate if that's what you want, or throwing an understable enough disc that's actually going to flip up, catch the wind underneath, and then it might fly even further, and you can take advantage of that wind, kind of like a kite. So with that wind coming in, it'll hold that disc up and fly further. So left to right, throwing it, if it comes up and catches, you might be good. It might go far. It might even come over too much, but it gets real tricky. You have to be real careful with that left to right wind. So that's it about wind, and that's it about the Hyzer shot. So just keep in mind, Hyzer shot like this, right hand, backhand, gonna flip up, and the headwind's gonna destabilize it, the tailwind's gonna stabilize it, and left to right, you just kind of be careful about how that's gonna work as far as pushing your disc over, holding it down. Just think about that flight plate and what that wind's gonna do. So when you're throwing a disc, especially in a Hyzer position, in this case, really think about where that wind's coming from and how it's gonna be pushing that disc. And even when you're throwing a Hyzer shot, you have to think about your nose position. So you can throw a Hyzer shot with a nose up or a nose down, and that's going to be a big difference, especially if you're talking about the wind as well. So a Hyzer shot with the nose up also stabilizes. If you think about it, when you throw a Hyzer shot that's already stable and you put the nose up, you're catching more wind. Even if it's a low amount of wind, it it's stable. It's like almost like putting on the brakes already, so it's stabilizing that disc because that wind's hitting underneath here. If you're throwing with a nose down with a headwind or any kind of wind coming, light headwind, it's actually going to be pushing here, and it can be pushing the disc down, but it's not quite as, it's going to destabilize it a little bit, but not as stable as if you have a headwind and you throw it nose up. That's when you see them really stabilize out and like kind of pinch off before they actually get their flight. So keep that in mind when you release the disc, not just if it's a Hyzer position, flat or anhyzer, but also that nose position. In a Hyzer position, a nose up makes it more stable, nose down makes it less stable. Keep that in mind. We'll get more details on that, and we'll talk about the anhyzer in another video. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and thanks. Go ahead and subscribe. Got more videos coming out. Thanks again for all your support. Have a good day.